Welcome to another episode of the Jay and Rob Toy Show. And today we've got 2 tickets to paradise, or at least 2 people talking about toys. Let me bring in the Bugs Bunny to my Daffy Duck, Mr. Jay Bartlett.
Like the Eddie Money song? Is that what you're going for there with that one?
Well, it wasn't Eddie Rabbit. I hope you're ready to talk toys today, my friend.
Absolutely, dude. That intro was probably the best yet. It was great.
You're welcome for that. And wait till we get to this episode, because this episode sees us look at how things came to be and what makes them so great in some cases and maybe not so great in other cases. And that's very cryptic, but just bear with me, everybody out there. First thing I want to talk about are toy stores, Jay. I want to talk about some of the toy stores specifically that we visited when we made Action Figure Adventure Season 1. And I want to talk about what makes each of them so great. And I'm going to let you start this off. Pick any toy store that we went to, and I want to hear from you what makes it so great in your opinion.
Well, let's start off with our hometown of London and Heroes Comics, which is, boy, the longest standing comic store that I remember going to, you remember going to. What makes it so great? I believe it changed ownership around the year 2000, give or take a couple years. And I remember Brom was one of the first people I remember who was selling vintage toys. And I remember the day we went in there and we kind of looked at each other. You know, he had the glass display cases, looked really nice, well lit. And there was like used toys like He-Man and stuff like that. And we were like, that's kind of weird, isn't it? You know, you and I go there at least once a week. There's something for everybody. There's comic books, there's sports cards, there is retro dollies, there's new dollies, anything you could possibly want at Heroes.
So I think you hit on 3 key points there that I'm 100% behind and support. This is not something we are going to disagree with, if you can believe it out there, folks. You hit on an awesome owner, you hit on a diverse selection of things within the store, and you also hit on an established history. Brom has been running Heroes for well over 20 years. Heroes as a store has been in London, our hometown in Ontario, for a long time, but they do simply have everything. And those 3 things, owner, history, and selection, are pretty integral for any toy store to be great. Is there anything else you can think that makes Heroes really kind of stand out amongst other toy stores?
Heroes is gigantic. This store is enormous. It's now 2 floors, which is also great. And there's just different sections throughout the store. The deeper you get, it seems the rarer the stuff. And when you go to the very back, you have like that vault of glass where all the rare stuff is. And it's a trip because each section of the store is a little adventure in its own. It's really cool.
And don't forget the Wall of Legends. The wall that you have to look up by our good friend Silver Surfer hanging there, where they have some other carded figures. I think one other thing that Heroes does really well, and some other stores do this too, is they cross-pollinate within the pop culture sphere. So Heroes, first and foremost, was a comic store. And boy, are they still an incredible comic store. Whether you want, back issues, you pick Golden Age, Silver Age, or new stuff that's coming out, they got you covered. Variant covers, everything that you can think of, comics is amazing there. Now, Treehouse Collectibles is nowhere near the scale of Heroes. Now, Treehouse is located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, a couple hours away from our hometown store of Heroes. It's nowhere near the scale. It also serves video games and records out there for any collectors in those categories. But what makes Treehouse good, because like I said, it's a lot smaller, but it's one of our favorites too.
Look at my face when you say Treehouse. All I could think about is going there, and I hate to pick favorites, but Treehouse is definitely up there. They have so much good vintage stuff there that it's absolutely insane. And it's not the size of Heroes, and not even close, but every little square inch you're looking around at shelves and what's on the walls and what's behind the counters.
What I really appreciate about Treehouse, probably more than any other store, is that it's all killer and no filler. There's literally something quality everywhere your eyeballs turn. It's not like you have some junk stuff here and there might be a treasure if you dig through it. It's literally all treasure, every display case, every rack, every shelf, everywhere. There's just nothing that isn't top notch. And even if it's a common character, he's been cleaned up and she could have all her accessories or whatever the case might be. It's pristine and in the best case. And then of course, they have just a huge selection of rare items across the board.
Very Star Wars heavy too, which is great. But when Chris makes a Facebook post or a social media post promoting new stuff, you'll often notice that almost every single time the figures, the vehicle, the playset is 100% complete. And you can tell that he really takes his time. I don't know if it's just the collections he buys or if he pieces together stuff, but you'll see a lot of visionaries. They all have their totems, they all have their staffs, they all have the helmets. So it's really great since I'm looking for some Inhumanoids. So I look forward to going to Treehouse and hopefully Chris can help me out.
All right, Jay, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the next big thing in the how did it come to be this way? What is the secret sauce that made this happen? And specifically, I want to talk about horror-based action figures, okay? This is something that really pulled us into collecting, of course, around turn of the century, the year 2000, because horror figures were one of those big first adult collectibles that could come out there. But why horror figures, and which ones stand out to you the most, maybe even outside the legendary McFarlane movie maniacs?
Well, I've been a horror movie fan since I was too young to watch horror movies. I remember going to my Aunt Lynn's after school, and she loved horror movies. I saw everything. I fell in love with Jason, Freddy, and Reanimator, all that kind of good stuff. The ones that stand out for me, besides the McFarlane, and let's give credit where credit is due, Todd McFarlane is solely responsible for bringing these into the pop culture mainstream, absolutely. The NECA stuff. Specifically, I love Herbert West from Reanimator. It's a good cross between a doll and an action figure because he has real cloth clothing that's pretty well tapered, but the likeness to Jeffrey Combs is just uncanny. He even has little lenses in his glasses, and he comes with the vial of the reagent. It's a stunning figure. A lot of the NECA stuff is fantastic.
Yeah, NECA is one of those companies that has really kept the torch for horror-based figures alive, and they might be even considered one of the leaders at this point in horror action figures, especially if you throw in Predator and Alien as potential horror-based action films almost. I mean, Predator's the first one was a little bit more action-based, but Alien has always been kind of rooted in horror and became a little bit more about explosions later on, but terrifying monsters at the very least. I want to give a shout out to the Toonie Terrors that NECA does. I think that's the line where they're almost cartoon approaches to those iconic characters that everybody knows so well. And of course, there's the Savage World horror line that takes that He-Man-like design buck and turns them into horror figures that we know and love as well. I don't know what that secret sauce is for why horror figures continue to be popular. I don't know if it's just that it's an adult thing being a horror movie, and now that we're adults that these are made specifically for us versus Batman could be for kids. I don't know if it's just we need that physical representation of something that existed out there in that horror thing that scared us as a kid. So now we want to have a hold of it, or if it's just simply, like I said, because we're scared by it and it's a visceral experience, we just want to hang on to it a bit more.
Horror movies back when you and I were growing up were almost like this kind of taboo thing. Like we weren't supposed to be looking at it, we weren't supposed to be watching it. I remember there was a kid who went to high school and he had the Freddy glove. And I remember that was a really rare thing. It wasn't like today where you can just go to the party store and get a replica of Freddy's glove. He had that and it was so cool. So now it's like there's really great artistic versions, articulated figures of these icons, and we can just put them on our shelf, and I don't know, there's just something really cool about that.
Yeah, it's not like it's caught on for other genres though, right? I mean, you see comedy movies that go extremely crazy over the top with box office dollars, but any figures that they release for that stuff doesn't really ever take hold. You see fantasy type stuff get released, and of course, fantasy is huge for adult pop culture collectors. And again, it doesn't take hold. So there's got to be something about the secret sauce of horror films and those horror characters that just keeps us coming back. And hey, if there's ever a genre, and if there's ever characters that are going to get us to plunk down dollars over and over and over again for another Jason figure, another Michael Myers, another Freddy Krueger, sure, it's that genre. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just that powerful, that those characters are that memorable and they mean that much to us, but it works. Like rinse and repeat. Horror figures seem to be here forever. And even new icons come in and get figures, like the Nun, for example.
Yeah, she's really taken off. And the Toonie Terror figures, they have a Regan figure. I don't know if you've seen Regan, but she looks extremely cool in cartoon version as well.
I'm invincible!
Hi, I'm Tracy.
And I'm Jason.
From Tracy's Basement, and this is our collection. Some of the first things you see when you come down the basement among the autographs and shot glasses and film cells and minifigures is our 3 Batman 66 statues. These guys are so amazing. They're some of our favorite things in the collection, and they look great here with the Adam West and Frank Gorshin autographed photographs. And I especially love the sparkly purple on Batgirl's uniform.
This is our Mega Man shelf. I've been a massive Mega Man fan since the 8-bit days on the NES. This is a Mega Man X from True Force Collectibles. This is one of my favorite figures. It's got like a die-cast feel to it. You can really feel the weight in the figure, and you can really feel the quality that was put into the figure.
For sheer quantity in our collection, it has to be Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. This is one of the main anime that we grew up with as kids, and it has endured as one of our favorite things ever. We have a wide variety of Dragon Ball figures and statues and toys. Bam Presto makes some amazing stuff for a really decent price. It's fantastic looking on a shelf, and we just adore collecting possibly every iteration of every character that we can find. Frieza in particular has his own shelf because he may be the badassest of all villains of all time.
So some of my absolute favorite figures in the entire collection are actually these Bucky O'Hare figures. These are by Boss Fight Studio. Massively underrated company. They should be way more popular than they are, but they're a very smaller toy company. This is an original Deadeye Duck, which is awesome in its own way, in its own right. That's an awesome figure, an awesome 90s figure. And this is the new Boss Fight Studios Deadeye Duck. This is the special variant, actually, but it's the same mold. And it is just such an amazing update. A lot of modern toys online, you get a lot of flack from people nowadays, and you hear things like people say, oh, they just don't make toys like they used to. That's not always a bad thing. So, I mean, you look at this and it's awesome, but it is a chunk. It's a plastic chunk with barely any articulation. 5 points articulation. The stuff they're coming out with now, it's amazing what they're doing with toys.
One of the best shelves, in my opinion, in our basement is the Ninja Turtles shelf. It is one of our biggest fandoms between both of us because we grew up with it. It was always something that we both loved, and especially the live-action original movie was a huge thing in our childhoods, and we both, I believe, that was like the first movie we had ever gone to see in theaters. So when NECA came out with these quarter-scale versions of the actual suited turtles from the live-action movie, they were an absolute must-have. Jason picked up the Raphael first because that is his favorite turtle. Mine is Donatello, so he came next, and then of course we couldn't just leave the two brothers by themselves, we had to get the other two as well. So now this is by far our favorite shelf in the entire basement.
This is the NECA 8-bit line. These are all repaints of figures that they've done of characters in the past, but they're all Nintendoized, to put it bluntly. They're all done in an 8-bit paint job. We go right over from Godzilla right at the end, which I love because I'm a massive Godzilla fan. If you can see just over on this shelf here, I've just got tons of Godzilla stuff. I'd love to have more Godzilla stuff, but room and time and money and the fact that I'm into absolutely everything does not help. And then we go to the Alien and the Predator, and I need the blue Predator from the first Predator game, and then I have my absolute favorite of the entire set, which is the NECA 8-bit Jason. These were originally released at SDCC. This isn't the SDCC version. This is the re-release, which I actually think looks way better than the SDCC version. I know, oh, it's not exclusive, I'm going to get guff for that. But I don't care about exclusivity. In fact, I hate exclusivity. I wish less places would do exclusivity because it drives me nuts. Because all it does is create divide and I can't get anything I want. And I'm an opener. I don't care what it's worth.
This is a third room that isn't actually in the basement because we just have too much stuff. So this is my reading room where I have some random stuff, but mostly what is in here is my McFarlane dragons, which are one of the first toy lines that I began collecting back when Jason and I were first dating and began collecting together. So those are pretty amazing, and I have quite a few of them at this point. And the other amazing thing that is in this room are my lightsabers, all three of which Jason got me, and they are just amazing. Star Wars is one of my big fandoms, so this is just freaking cool. So I hope you guys enjoyed that look at some of the favorite things in our collection. I also want to thank Rob and Jay for letting us show this stuff off to you today, and there's always more to see on Tracy's Basement, so check that out. Thanks again to Rob and Jay. Bye!
All right, changing gears one more time, Jay. I want to talk about some lesser known action figure lines. Now, these are lines that I would describe as didn't get a lot of love compared to some of the bigger lines that took off. Now, every toy maker out there has had lesser popular lines. Mattel has had them, Hasbro has had them, Kenner has had them. Everyone has them. Not everything that these companies make is a success. So I want you to pick maybe your favorite lesser known line out there or lesser loved line. And let's talk about it and figure out maybe why did it not take off like some of the other lines did.
Sure, absolutely. I have a feeling we're gonna know why this one didn't take off, but I'm gonna pick Advanced Dungeons & Dragons by LJN, which was just an absolutely colorful, beautiful action figure line that came out in 1983. Some of my figures, Warduke is one of my top 5 of all time. He has been since I was a kid. This is the problem. This is what I think happened. You had the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon that was loosely based on the role-playing game that had the kid stars and the figures were based on the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rule set, the actual role-playing dice-based game. And they stuck Warduke in one of the episodes for the cartoon, and they stuck Tiamat, the five-headed dragon, in the intro. But there was this real disconnect, and that goes to show you that back in the 80s, how much that the cartoon needed the action figure line, and the action figure line needed the cartoon to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's a real interesting choice because it's not like, just a cartoon and a toy line. With D&D and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, you've got the game, the cartoon, and the figures. It was a three-hander, and which, version are you gonna go with to cater to which audience? Because Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the game, might not have worked for that 5 to 9-year-old crowd. It might have been too advanced for them. But the cartoons and the toys could easily more coalesce. So how do you wrangle that, that matrix of those three things?
It was obviously some kind of bizarre miscommunication between the two, right? Because the kids that were your heroes, there was, the mage, the warrior, etc. They were great characters, and that cartoon was fantastic. So why they didn't make those core heroes, and they didn't even make Dungeon Master? I believe later on down the line there was some PVC versions, way after, they didn't move or anything, but they didn't make Dungeon Master or any of the core heroes. So you're watching the cartoon, and you see the action figure line, and the action figure line, the packaging was beautifully illustrated, but it was done in the same style as the Advanced D&D rulebook. Very adult, very adult fantasy, and I just don't think it appealed to kids. Kids didn't understand what that was.
And interestingly enough, it's one of the few 80s properties that's remembered well, that's still collected very well and hard, but we haven't got any reissues or refreshes or new takes on those characters. There's been a few, like you said, some maybe PVC, some statue type stuff, but never a whole line that has gone out to say, okay, here's the 6-inch version of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, or here's the new crowd-funded Fortress of Fangs playset.
And you want to talk about holy grails, my friend. Anyone out there in TV land has Tiamat from this line, you're sitting on a gold mine, because that dragon's worth a fortune.
Ah, there's that relaxing tidal wave oceanic sound that means it's time for Action Figure Spotlight. Jay, what do you have to showcase this week given everything we've discussed?
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to the horror movie community, and I'm going to showcase my favorite icon from my favorite horror movie. Yes, Rob, it used to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's been replaced over a decade by Herbert West from The Reanimator. This is that NECA figure that I was speaking about earlier. Absolutely gorgeous. Cloth clothing, which, as I've stated many times, I'm not usually a fan of. But on Herbert, the lab coat fits perfect. The shirt is tapered, the pants are tapered. And yes, that makes a huge difference. There's nothing worse than getting a NECA figure like the Bill and Ted ones, and the clothes are just ridiculous baggy and it looks kind of like a doll. This one's great. There's the syringe full of the reagent. He's even got some blood on the shovel as well. He also comes with the severed head, the dead cat, and the pan as well. But yeah, he's cool, man. And you really got to take a look up close at Herbert. They even put little lenses, like I said, in his glasses. It looks just like Jeffrey Combs. The likeness is fantastic. Great articulation. This is the pose he's been in since I opened it because he's pretty much holding all the accessories he comes with. Herbert West.
Well, for Action Figure Spotlight, for me this week, I'm gonna go with something that's related to toy stores. While we made Action Figure Adventure, I got to do some trips on my own, and I went to a store called Rip and Run Collectibles in New Jersey, and I had no shopping list with me. I didn't really have anything in mind that I wanted to, discover or add to my collection. I just wanted to see what was there. So it was all about pure discovery. And on the wall, I saw 3 commemorative 2000 era Masters of the Universe figures. So these are the figures that they re-released to basically pay homage to the original figures. And in particular, I picked up Faker. I also picked up, I think, Merman and Trapjaw, but I'd never had Faker. One of my favorite details, because the figure is practically the same as the original release, except for encased in this black slip cover with the scroll name on there. And again, one of my favorite notable trivia moments about this line in particular is Mattel didn't have the molds for them, so they actually had to buy vintage characters that were in mint condition from eBay and cast new molds. So some of the detail is a little bit off. And on the boots and the heels, they put little markings so that collectors would know the difference between the original vintage ones and the 2000 era reissues. So Faker.
That's very, very cool because yeah, the last thing you want to do is have a bunch of people running around trading in the new stuff, right? And trying to pass it off as vintage. So good job, Mattel.
Well, that'll do it for another episode of the Jay and Rob Toy Show. Jay, welcome back to the lightning round as we end our episode. And this time you have to choose between lesser known toy lines, these lines that didn't get quite enough love to become icon status. Are you ready?
When did this become a game show? Yes, I'm ready.
It's always been a game show, and question 1 sees you pick between Battlestar Galactica and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons.
Oh, D&D.
Question number 2 sees you pick between Cops and Visionaries.
Cops, hands down.
And question number 3 sees you pick between Mask and GoBots.
GoBots.
Of course he would pick GoBots. Well, you got that one right, brother. You got GoBots right.
No, Mask. I was joking.
It's too late. It's in the record books. It counts. Thank you for watching.